atWork Australia would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the lands and pay our respect to elders past and present. This podcast is being recorded in the southwest and Western Australia, which is land of the Noongar people. We'd also like to pay our respects and acknowledge the traditional custodians of the lands from wherever you may be listening from. Hello and welcome everyone to another episode of Candid Conversations with Shaun. My guest in this episode is Sarah. She's a part of atWork Australia's wellness team. She's a registered psychologist and she's here today to share her knowledge and experience to help us to be able to better support our friends, our family members, our colleagues, our employees who might be experiencing anxiety. So a big thank you to Sarah for kindly sparing us some of her time and sharing her knowledge and experience with us all today. Thanks for taking the time to come in and share your experience with us on anxiety and talk to us about how we can support our employees, our colleagues who might be experiencing anxiety in the workplace.
And thank you for inviting me.
Before we get stuck into the topic of today, do you mind sharing a bit about your current role with atWork Australia and your employment history?
Yeah, sure. So I work for the wellness services team for atWork Australia under the MedHealth umbrella as a psychologist. And our aim is to support clients in reducing barriers to employment from a psychological perspective, because as we know, work is a large part of our lives. I currently service clients in the Barwon region in Victoria, and I also travel and support a team in Tasmania.
And just got to jump in there, are you mainly supporting clients from our Disability Employment Service contract, our Workforce Australia contract, or is it a mixture of both?
At the moment, it's just the Workforce Australia contract, and I think there's a bit of a merge that we're working on where we'll be able to support both.
Yeah, okay, nice one.
And yeah, I also enjoy facilitating a peer support group with colleagues when I can and liaising with other divisions of the team, because it really is a team effort within the wellness services.
And what about before atWork Australia? What were you doing before then?
Probably about 10 years ago when I was finishing off my studies in psychology, I was working in conference and events management and, operations coordination and doing some work with the Special Olympics. I was also a nature tour guide, which was incredibly fun. And then I kind of moved on into more event facilitating, running leadership and team building events for businesses. And then I traveled abroad for a while and worked on some youth recreational programs in Guatemala and children's community learning platforms in Italy. And then moving more into psychology-based roles, I worked for an Indigenous organisation a few years back where I was really welcomed into the community and studied about, Native culture and perspective of healing and community and psychology from an Aboriginal perspective, and onto another company where I was facilitating group mental health workshops for clients with dual diagnoses. So I did those two jobs for a few years, and then I decided that I wanted to change and move into the employment sector for psychology. So that's where I work now. And I also work private practice 2 days a week at the moment as well.
Yeah, okay. So all those ventures you just spoke about, it sounds like you've done a lot of fun things. Were you doing that while you were studying? Is that sort of stuff you had to do those different work activities to be able to get your qualifications and finish your studies?
No, that's been my journey over the last 10 years after finishing my psychology studies. I kind of took the conference, events, project management, events, facilitation and creation for a sense of mental health, which I really enjoy, and then moved on to more specific stereotypical psychology, one-on-one sessions and things like that.
Yeah, okay. And can you briefly tell us about your experience with the Special Olympics? What were you doing there? I'm a Paralympian, so whenever someone mentions sport, always gets my interest.
Yeah. Well, it was kind of more so on the marketing side of things, really. So liaison with different businesses to get support for funding of local community Special Olympics events and programs. It might have been, funding to create an event at a gym or at a conference center for youth.
Yeah, okay. And why psychology? What made you go down this path? Is it something you've always been passionate about? But I guess just from listening from your previous experience and your history, you are very passionate about working with youth and supporting people.
Yeah, I think really I'm a humanitarian in a lot of ways, and I've just always been interested in, humans and the mind and the subconscious mind, more particularly the layers and the depth of what makes us all unique and individual, why we do what we do, why we say or feel or think or behave the way we do. In an individual sense, but I think also what makes us all alike. We're social creatures, so the shared perspective of what connects us.
Yeah, right. Interesting. And
Mm.
just out of my own curiosity to go down the path that you have and to become a qualified psychologist, how many years at university are people looking at if they want to go down the same path?
Well, it differs really. For me, 7.5 years, because
Wow. Is
I've,
that full
yeah,
time?
yep, full time, yep.
Does that include a master's?
Yes. So it could
Ah,
include, could be probably six, probably, 6 to 8,
yep.
depending on which pathway. There's master's, PhD, there's on work kind of provisional basis. So it really depends on the path that one wishes to take. But
And
average would be probably, 6 to 8 years.
wow. Any more study on your horizon or you done?
Yeah, in the future, yeah, I like to learn. I'm looking into some little small courses or, kind of endorsements that I can add on to my general registration. So something like EMDR, which is a trauma-based specific therapy. You can do maybe a 4 to 5 day course on that one.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah,
Sounds like you're a lifelong learner.
yeah, yeah, indeed.
Yeah. So if we move on to today's topic of anxiety, I'm sure we all have a basic understanding of what anxiety is, and we've probably all experienced anxiety in some aspect. But can you explain to us what anxiety is in the professional sense?
So, really, I guess anxiety is actually a natural response to stress. So, within moderation, it can be beneficial. We're talking about healthy anxiety. So, that's an adaptive response to stress or perceived threats. And that serves as a protective mechanism for us. It can help us stay alert or focused, primarily in situations that would require preparation or caution. And so the functionality of this healthy anxiety is something that can motivate us to take necessary actions. Such as preparing for an interview, as an example. So it gives us a heightened awareness and an enhanced performance and can increase our problem solving. It's when anxiety in the professional sense becomes unhealthy. This is typically when the response is disproportionate to the actual threat or the challenge being faced. And this is when the anxiety can cause us issues in our daily functioning. And that would usually involve an excessive sense of rumination or overthinking, perhaps about potential future events. And that's when we have the manifestation of, the physical or behavioral or cognitive type symptoms, and when anxiety can become, I guess, a disorder.
Yeah, okay. So I know you just mentioned there's the healthy and unhealthy anxiety. Is there any other types of anxiety that we might see or we should be aware of?
I think, really, in a general sense, healthy anxiety is a protective mechanism that we all feel. When it becomes unhealthy, that's when there might be some differentiation. There's different types of anxiety. There's generalized anxiety, social anxiety, there's specific phobias, panic disorders, but I guess they're all types of unhealthy anxiety.
And I guess, like, where would nerves sit? Would nerves be a healthy anxiety? We know if we're preparing for an interview, preparing for a sporting event, or going to do something we're not totally comfortable, everyone gets nervous at some point. Would that be a form of anxiety?
Yeah, I mean, anxiety relates to our nervous system, and that's where the idea of like being nervous or having nerves comes from. I think if those nerves, doing a performance or preparing for an interview is something that we can all relate to. If this type of nerves are, they're typically short-lived and they're directly related to the specific situation. And then once that challenge or the threat, or the situation has passed, then those nerves or that anxiety will diminish. And the intensity of those nerves or that healthy anxiety is proportionate to the situation, and therefore it would not impede further on our daily functioning.
Yeah, okay. And if we're looking to support someone who might be experiencing anxiety, what might some of the signs or symptoms that someone might be experiencing, I guess, those unhealthy levels of anxiety?
I guess really the biggest one would be the persistent and the excessive worrying or rumination, which is going over and over and over in our mind. That's probably the biggest common emotional sign, alongside things like a sense of overwhelm or irritability in an emotional sense. We could also, I guess, look out for other impacts, restlessness, feeling irritable, having a difficulty concentrating. And then other signs or symptoms of anxiety on a physical sense, it could be fatigue or muscle tension. People might avoid certain situations. We could look out for impacts like sleep disturbances or social withdrawal.
You said, I was going to ask a question there, if we're supporting a colleague or a client, could there, someone showing up late or constantly moving or cancelling appointments, not showing up on time to work, could that be a sign of anxiety that they might be trying to avoid the situation? So they put off getting in the car and going to work or doing what they need to do to get there on time because they're trying to avoid having to be in that environment?
Yeah, absolutely. Anxiety does birth a lot of avoidant behaviors. And in a work sense, that could relate to, being away from work, calling in sick, missing work more frequently. And as a result, there's always twofold with anxiety. It'll start with the increased absenteeism, but then, that will impact into impaired work relationships or a reduced job performance because one isn't at work, a lack of career progression as an example. And then those things provide that person with more anxiety.
Yeah, and I guess it just has a snowballing effect then.
Yeah.
And my next question was going to be, how does anxiety impact someone in their daily life and in the workplace? But I think you've just covered that quite well. When
Thanks.
first it sort of starts by they might not be showing up on time, which then starts impacting their relationships with their colleagues and impacting their performance at work as well. And then, like you say, it affects their ability to be able to progress within their role as well.
And then in an individual sense of self too, that can then therefore impact one's self-esteem or confidence, within the job role or within relationships within life. And as I mentioned before, disturbed sleep or difficulty concentrating, which then would relate to further emotional distress.
Yeah. And I guess this might be the most important question to ask you today. Once we've then recognized someone might be experiencing anxiety, what can we do to support that individual to be able to overcome or manage their anxiety to be able to, I guess, engage in day-to-day activities?
I mean, from an employment sense or
I guess
just in
both.
general?
I guess from a colleague, from a friend, from a family member, from a manager trying to support one of their employees. How would we go about supporting an individual? I guess each setting might have a different approach.
I guess supporting colleagues or friends who are experiencing anxiety, first and foremost, really involves creating a safe and understanding environment where that person can feel comfortable in expressing their feelings and comfortable in seeking help. So if we are actively listening to this person, without a sense of judgment or and with empathy, this offers them a sense of encouragement and reassurance and the normalization of anxiety that it is okay to not be okay. Encouraging self-care practices, even like relaxation techniques and exercise, and helping a person to become educated about anxiety, offering understanding and patience about that person's experience.
And I know you just mentioned these techniques that people can do. Is there any that you could share with us today? Any simple techniques that people could implement in their everyday life that, maybe wouldn't even be visible to others, something they could do sitting at the desk, standing on a bus that could help make them more relaxed and reduce their anxiety?
I think breathing is a really good one to regulate the nervous system and to bring ourselves back down and ease the physical response in our body when we get hyped up feeling anxiety. I think breathing is a really good one because we've always got our breath with us. So we can do that anytime. So structured breathing techniques like the box breathing technique, generally we'll breathe in and then out. The box breathing is breathing in, holding that breath, breathing out, holding that breath. And generally it's on a count of 4 seconds. So it's inhale, hold, exhale, hold, just for 4 seconds. And you can do that 3 to 4 times over. So it's a conscious, structured breathing exercise that brings all our attention and focus onto our breath and gives us a moment to buffer away from our mind and the thoughts that we might be having.
Yeah, and I guess that's quite a simple technique that you can do anywhere and doesn't really draw attention to yourself, so no one's going to be aware of what you're actually doing.
Correct.
Do you think some people might feel ashamed around experiencing anxiety, but when the truth might be that the statistics might indicate that there's more people experience anxiety than people who don't experience anxiety?
Yeah, absolutely. I think a lot of people that are experiencing anxiety, it's a very internal process where people can feel quite isolated. And because anxiety is generally related to rumination, which is that overthinking, it's one thought to another, to another, to another. And the more thoughts we have, the more we build ourselves up. And that's all going on inside. So I think anxiety can be quite isolating. And I think a lot of people do feel like it's only them. But the idea is that somebody could be sitting next to you experiencing anxiety internally in their mind, and, having the physiological symptoms. They're getting sweaty and their heart's pumping, and you might not be able to tell that that's what's going on for them.
Yeah, okay. And is there any specific tips or advice for employers or what organisations can do to make a more welcoming environment that is supportive for people who experience anxiety?
I think first and foremost, really normalizing, anxiety, and that it is okay, normalizing mental health. I think when an employer can foster a supportive environment, that's open and compassionate in the workplace, one it's stigma free, it's really important to recognize that the anxiety can affect someone's productivity and focus and well-being, and that it might not always be visible. So offering this supportive environment to share the experience, it would be very helpful firstly, so that that person feels safe and comfortable.
And I guess that I know organisations are trying a lot better these days to try and remove the stigma associated with mental health. From your professional opinion, do you think we've come a long way in creating more inclusive workplaces?
Yeah, absolutely. Most workplaces will have EAP services now. There's a lot of companies that have got mental health days, taking off a mental health day. A lot of companies will offer mental health trainings or, little courses, and, have team building or debriefing sessions. So, having that flexibility and support that is extending the workplace experience can really help.
And I think it's really important, it's all well and good to have these initiatives in place, but I think it's important for employees to be able to see their leaders using and promoting these initiatives so that they can see that, they're there, but it's okay that I take my mental health day and no one's going to look down upon me for using that.
Yeah, absolutely. It's supportive. There's no pressure, and it can help us to also check in and gauge where we are, where we're at. And even having those check-ins, with managers and teams, they're essential in workplace.
Are there any myths or any common myths or misconceptions associated with anxiety?
There are definitely several misconceptions about anxiety. I think the common ones are, anxiety is just worrying too much, or it's something that you can just, snap out of, or stop worrying, stop thinking about it. When in reality, anxiety is quite a complex mental health condition when it's unhealthy. That's not just the psychological symptoms, there's also physical symptoms as well. I think another misconception is that when somebody has anxiety, they cannot be successful or productive. And I think, and there are lots of people that have anxiety that can thrive in their careers if they learn how to use that to propel them into performance, and implement coping strategies.
So if someone is experiencing anxiety and we're aware of it, what should we do to support that person? What should be the first point of call?
Yeah, well, I think really the first step is acknowledging the anxiety and helping that person to recognize that it's okay to seek help. A lot of
Yeah.
people have barriers with actually taking that step. So sometimes it
Right.
is just about talking to a trusted person first, a friend or a family member or colleague, to reduce feelings of isolation. And I think next it would be to consider, professional help. And there's a few ways to do that. If somebody goes to a GP, they can get a mental health care plan to get up to 10 sessions a year on a Medicare rebate to see a psychologist or private therapist who can kind of tailor and assess and tailor a treatment plan, and help them learn some techniques to manage. Self-care is a really big part as well of that for seeking support.
Yeah, and I hazard a guess that the numbers of people experiencing anxiety and depression in today's world is only going to continue to increase with, the high cost of living and the other added pressures of everyday life. We're probably going to start seeing more people experiencing these feelings. So it's just really important to keep an eye out for our colleagues, keep an eye out for our friends, and just, like you say, be that open ear where people can speak to you if they need to.
Yeah, that's right. 'Cause anxiety really relates to a sense of needing reassurance and being unsure. And, in an unsure and in a changing world, it's the perfect breeding ground for worrying and for anxiety. And also the element of what we can do for ourselves, in terms of realizing that we are able to challenge our thoughts. A really good one to ask ourselves is this a thought or a fact? Because a lot of the time, these anxiety provoking thoughts are things that might not have happened yet and they're not actually facts. So, if we can kind of bring it back down to reality and realize that what we're thinking about is not a fact, sometimes it can help us to relieve that sense of future worry.
Yeah, I really like that point because a lot of time, probably myself included, we might worry about things that is a thought and it's something that might not have happened or it might not ever happen. So what's the point? Why are we worrying
Mm,
about it? Is that, it's not a fact.
mm.
It might not ever even come to life.
Yeah, precisely. And I think generally anxiety is a focus on the past, thinking about, oh, that conversation I've had, why did I say that? Or, what is that person thinking about me? There's a fear of judgment associated. So there can be excessive worry and rumination about the past, which has already happened and we cannot change or control. And then there's also, a future worry about things that haven't happened yet. So anxiety takes us out of this present moment. And that's another really important one for, managing anxiety ourselves, is to bring ourselves back to what is going on right now, where are we right now? And a really good one for that is mindfulness. So that relates to using the five senses, because our senses exist in this moment as the way in which we experience the world in a present moment awareness is through our senses. So if we can focus on what we can see, hear, taste, smell, or feel in this moment, and if we can focus on that in our mind, then our mind will not go to the past or the future. We can choose what we focus on in our mind. And, it's like if I say to you, hey, think of a pink elephant. You're thinking of a pink elephant and you're not really thinking about anything else. So if we can choose to direct the focus of our mind and our attention, then we can choose to step away from the anxiety provoking thoughts.
Interesting.
Mm.
And just to wrap things up and to finish off this conversation,
Mm.
what would your one piece of advice or the most important tip be for trying to support a person who is living with anxiety?
That's a really good question. I would say just breathe. And I know that that's so simple, but just breathe. Take a buffer, take a moment before acting or, hyping yourself up into something. Just breathe.
Well, Sarah, thank you so much for coming in today and sharing your experience with us and your knowledge on anxiety. I'm sure a lot of people will take a lot away from hearing your thoughts and your knowledge of anxiety. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you, Shaun.
Thanks everyone for tuning in for another episode I really hope you took a lot away from my conversation with Sarah and you feel more confident to be able to support a person who might be experiencing anxiety. As always, if you like this episode or any of our episodes, please be sure to like and subscribe. And once again, to find out any more information about anything we discussed, please refer to the links in the show notes. See you next time, guys.